Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
We're live at the Miami Book Fair, powered by Life Improvement Radio. You can also go to neilhaley.com right now. Catch up with all my different social media networks. I'm with Peter Elvidge from the Perseverance Network and Eric Remmel from Life Improvement Media. And oh, wow, another awesome day at the Miami Book Fair, and I'm excited to welcome the program Angela Saini, and she's the author of Inferior, How Science Got Women Wrong and the New Research That's Rewriting the Story. Angela, thanks for calling. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, let's kind of go really quickly to the first question, Angela. Is this your first time at the Miami Book Fair?
It's actually my first time in Miami, and I'm very sorry that I'm only here for 24 hours. I'm going home tonight.
Okay, so where are you going to be traveling to tonight? You're going to have a long trip, yeah.
I do, yeah. I just came in from London last night, and I'm going back to London tonight.
Well, we have a great flagship station out in London, or one of my syndicated channels, UK Health Radio, that gets a huge listening audience. They do some tremendous things on UK Health Radio. So we are on in London as well. So just to give you that point, Angela.
Check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. UK Health Radio, one of our syndicated networks. It's always cool when you have London as one of your cities, and I love working with UK Health Radio. All right, so kind of, Angela, let's jump really quickly to how you became an author. Tell us that story.
Well, this is my second book, and my first one came out in 2011. I've been a science journalist for a really long time, for most of my career. And I guess it was a natural progression, really. Occasionally there are stories you come across that you just think, God, I wish I had a year or 2 years to really explore this in detail, to really write a narrative about this story. And that's what I've done. I did it in my first book, and it's exactly what I've tried to do with Inferior.
Wow. And that's the interesting part of that process, Angela. And when you write, what is the passion for the reason for you to write? What gives you that passion each time to write a book? What would you say?
Well, I think a lot of the time in science reporting, kind of what we read in the press is, a new discovery has come out. Look how amazing this is. But actually, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of agendas and politics behind research that we don't tend to hear about very much. They require a lot of work, a lot of investigation, really trying to get inside the heads of the people who are doing this work. And these stories don't often make it into the press. And so what I've tried to do with Inferior is kind of give people the story behind what they read about in the newspapers. Now, it was inspired largely by the fact that we get such conflicting information about what men and women are capable of. Sometimes, I've read in the papers women are no good at parking, that neuroscience tells us this, men are better at this, women are better at this, women are more intuitive and empathic, men are more rational and,
right.
More the thinking type. And I just thought, really, is that what the science really says? And actually, the science behind it is very complicated and sometimes affected by things like human prejudice and human bias that affects what the research says, but also the speculation that goes on around it.
Angela, you're hitting something that I have in debates and different things. Former teacher, runs a tutoring consulting company, and always I think that the parents have a lot to do with how their kids think and what interests they have and different things like that. And if we have this bias that girls are not good at math or science, or they don't have the capability, so we should focus on other careers for them, and that men are better in science and math, really we run into a lot of problems, or the prejudice about certain things. Well, because that's a woman, or because that's a man. A man can't do this, or a woman can't do this. And it's really, I believe, environmentally, Angela, is the cause, not genetically, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what the research seems to be suggesting, that a lot of this is cultural and social, and we kind of, because it's so ingrained, and it's been ingrained for so long, this is hundreds and hundreds of years of with these stereotypes that we've built up in our heads and that society has built up around us. We think it's biological because it's so prevalent, when in fact the research again and again, when we look at psychological differences between the sexes, when we look at brain differences, when we look at evolutionary history, actually, although there are some obvious physical differences, for example, hormonal and, in height and body mass and average weight and stuff like that, of course there are some physical differences. But as far as cognitive and psychological differences go, actually they're quite minimal, which really sits at odds with these stereotypes that we have. So we have to ask ourselves, when we see differences out in the world, when we see women underrepresented, for example, in government or in university departments as professors, don't jump to the biological as an explanation for that. Think about the kind of myriad historical, social, cultural reasons for that.
Yep. And that's my concern tremendously, Angela, is that there are women out there that are totally think like the what we think men should think like. And there are men out there that have certain psychological tendencies that we kind of put in a box that's a woman. So we will
which is very strange. Yeah.
We'll attack a man because he's emotional. We'll attack a man if they like to study more, or not like to study more, that are more into specific things that women enjoy. Or the same thing, women who like this, that, and the other, and have different responses and are not emotional. Then they have problems, Angela. And that just frustrates the heck out of me, because a lot of times the woman or the man feels like they have a genetic disorder, instead of just basically biologically. It is like rolling the die, and we just don't know what our tendencies and how we're going to be till it comes out, right, from the different.
And it's limited. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say it's limiting for everyone. It's as limiting for men as it is for women. I mean, I was watching on the plane over here, I was watching an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, that wonderful comedy series with Larry David. And he, in one of these episodes, he gives a boy who he perceives to be a little bit effeminate a sewing machine as a gift. And his mother is very offended. She thinks he's making some kind of point. And so she tells him, you have to go out and buy him something else. He loves the sewing machine. So the question is, who is in the wrong here? Is the boy in the wrong for liking a sewing machine? Of course not. Of course, boys can like whatever they want to like, and if it happens to be a sewing machine, great. Also, it doesn't make him effeminate.
Michael, go, Peter, jump right in. Go.
Yeah. Yes, I wanted to say something kind of on that point, because I did a YouTube video a little bit ago. It was just kind of a random video where I was talking about men wearing pink and how that's okay. And because a lot of society is like, whether it be those viewing a person as wearing pink or the person who might be considering it, are thinking, for a guy it's misplaced, or, and then it has reverse effects for women, if women decide to like their jeans or other different types of things. I think that we're making progress towards the right areas, like where both acceptance of being able to wear and being able to what to do, as yourself is becoming more and more apparent. But we still have a lot more work to do. But my curiosity for you is looking into the book. Was there any discussion kind of like around these areas, and then looking at like men and women kind of leadership wise, and kind of correlating between those two?
My book mainly looks at the kind of hard science of our biology, so our internal biology, not so much how we behave out in the real world, or, what are the social differences that we see, but what does biology actually tell us about who we really are. And actually, I think the best lesson of all comes from looking at evolutionary history. So if we look at hunter-gatherers, and there are many hunter-gatherer societies around the world, they tend to be, although not exclusively, but they tend to be quite egalitarian. So men and women do everything because they have to. That's the nature of subsistence living. And if you look at most poor communities around the world, and we have to remember most people around the world are poor, again, you see women working, you see women doing everything, because that's the nature of life and work. And we forget that. When we live in these kind of cushy middle-class worlds or societies, we kind of think in this kind of 1950s mindset that the man has always gone out, this kind of Flintstones model of the past, that the man has always gone out and got the bacon, and the woman has always stayed at home. That is not true. Our evolutionary history shows us that women have always gathered, they've always hunted, that men have always done the kind of stuff that we assume that women have always done, like cooking and childcare. So, the kind of 1950s stereotype that we have is very recent. Those lifestyles are really the privilege of wealthy societies in which women can afford not to work. Most women around the world do work, and they always have. That's just a fact of life.
See, and that's such an interesting point that you made about, again, women working and different things like that. I think that from what your research has gathered, Angela, this is going to lead to lots of controversy, because there are people out there as educators that believe that you should teach men different than women, girls different than boys. And if we continue to do that, how is that going to hurt the ability to see individuals? We need to teach everyone as individuals, not as a group of people. I think that's our biggest issue we're dealing with, and that's why we're seeing the trends that continue to be the same. Math and science are men, communications women. Women are not capable of handling the major jobs because of their opportunities to be mothers. If we continue to look at that in these gender differences, it's going to hurt things dramatically in the long run, even more than it is today.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we really need to radically rethink the way we raise our children, the way we teach them. And I know I have a 4-year-old son myself, and he just started school this year, and the teachers already talk in different ways about the boys and the girls. They'll say that the boys are slower at this, the girls are better at this. And that is very damaging. That already plants inside their minds these ideas of what's culturally appropriate, what they're capable of. And there may well be gender differences in how children learn, perhaps, although we don't really have that much research on it yet. There may well be very small differences in how they behave, although they are more likely to be cultural rather than biological from the evidence that we have. But let's treat them all the same and see what happens.
Yeah, why can't we do that?
Where's the harm in treating them the same? Especially since, at that age, prepubescent children are really, in many ways, identical. I mean, I dare anyone to tell the difference between a prepubescent boy or girl. They're very, very similar.
Let me throw in something that really makes me frustrated, Angela, and I'm going to go into a personal story. My son, Max, is 5, and he's very intelligent. However, he's odd. And this is defined by our world as odd, okay? So that we want to place him in a specific level as an odd person. I, in a way, am a odd person in the things I do and how I act and how I react to things, but I don't consider that I should be put into a specific label. My concern is that my son is still into Sesame Street at 5, and I don't see it as a problem. However, the preschool teacher said he's in his own world, he's so into that, and he's not socializing the appropriate way. Why do we force kids in this way? Because I'm an expert, and there could be a possibility of not a learning disability, but possible disability. But I don't want to react to that at this point, just because we should expect kids to socialize a specific way. Some kids are not as social as others. They grow later. Why do we want to put a label on people so quickly, Angela? And that kind of can direct their entire life.
Yeah, I mean, this is outside the research area of my book, but I think personally as a parent and as a science reporter, I think you're right that we do pathologize things too quickly. And pharmaceutical companies, I think, have really led the way on this. By pathologizing things, they can create drugs like for ADHD, for other conditions, and then create a disease. And in some ways, some people find that reassuring because then they know that this is a condition. My child isn't strange, they just have this condition. But actually, we're all strange in our own ways, aren't we? Mm-hmm. We all have things. We all have issues. We all have, different ways of behaving. When I was growing up, it took me a long time to get into boys. When I was a teenager, I was really into science and making things and building things. That doesn't make me odd. I've grown up to be a perfectly normal, however you define normal adult. I'm a perfectly successful adult, that's what I mean. So, we shouldn't worry about, it's very easy as parents and as educators, I think, to kind of obsess about the little things,
Right.
when in fact people are people, and most people are perfectly fine when they grow up. It's very few. I mean, it's a very few kind of in the margins that grow up to be psychopaths, for instance. Dangerous.
Yeah.
I just had a thought, kind of like segueing on here, is that does your book cover, persons with disabilities in any capacity? I'm just curious.
No, I tend not to look at things like that. I do look at kind of people who sit outside biological norms of sex. So this isn't disability. These are people who are defined as intersex. So chromosomally, they may not fit the normal XX or XY pattern, or their gender may be determined at birth. So these aren't very common conditions. They're quite rare, but they're very interesting from a scientific perspective because they really give us an insight into what does sex and gender really mean. What does it mean to be male and female if we know that there are people who fall between the two categories?
Oh, awesome.
I appreciate it.
So best place we can purchase your book, Angela. I didn't know this topic would interest me so much, but it does. And it makes it, I'm passionate about it because I was on the other side, Angela, now after working with so many students, tutoring them, and seeing that each individual is different and that men and girls and boys are not as different as people are saying. I just think these stereotypes are going to hurt us and hurt the child and hurt the adult. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Where's the best place we can purchase your book and learn more about you? Where can we go?
Well, it's published in America by Beacon Press and distributed by Penguin Random House. If anyone wants to come down to the Miami Book Fair today, I'm speaking at 11 a.m. and I'll be happy to sign copies of the book afterwards, but it should be in all the bookshops, Amazon, everywhere, and it's Beacon Press, Inferior.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling. Appreciate it, and best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye. See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. You're listening to Neil Haley's show, powered by Life Improvement Radio, live from the Miami Book Fair, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.